At first, it doesn't feel like mistrust. It feels like a pause that lasts a little too long, a hesitation before replying, a moment where something inside you leans back instead of forward. Nothing dramatic happens, no clear break, no sharp betrayal, just a subtle tightening in the chest, a sense that something once open has gone quiet. You notice it late at night when a message sits unanswered, not because you forgot, because you didn't feel ready to enter the space it would open. It feels unfamiliar and strangely heavy. You tell yourself you're just tired, that the day took too much out of you, that you'll respond tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and the feeling is still there. There's a distance that wasn't there before, not between you and them, but between you and the version of yourself that used to reach out easily. Most people would point to a moment, a fight, a disappointment, a sentence that landed wrong. But that's not the part most people notice. There's something quieter happening underneath. It shows up when you listen and realize you're listening differently now, not to understand, but to measure. You weigh words, tone, pauses. You catch yourself noticing what isn't said more than what is, and you don't know when that started. You remember a time when trust wasn't something you thought about. It was just there, like breathing. Now it feels conditional, unspoken, fragile in a way you don't quite want to admit. You still show up, you still care, you still give, but there's a thin layer between you and the moment. A kind of emotional glass. You can feel everything, but nothing touches you the same way. That's where it starts to change. Not when someone hurts you, but when you notice you're protecting something quietly without deciding to. You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You barely even acknowledge it. You just stop leaning all the way in. You laugh, but softer. You listen, but with an exit already in mind. You share, but only the parts that won't ache later. And the strange thing is, no one notices, because on the outside, nothing looks broken. You're still kind, still present, still reliable. But inside, something is calculating energy now, cost, return. You feel it when someone asks for more than you have. And instead of stretching, something in you goes still. You don't feel angry, you feel tired. That tiredness becomes familiar, like a low hum under everything. You begin to recognize patterns faster, too fast. You know where conversations are headed before they get there. You sense when someone is about to take without noticing. And instead of confronting it, you quietly adjust. You give less detail, less access, less room. You call it maturity, or boundaries, or growth. But that's not the part most people notice. There's something quieter happening underneath. Because trust doesn't disappear all at once. It thins, it fades in places no one sees. It leaves behind habits instead of wounds. You stop assuming safety, you start checking for it. And you don't remember choosing to do that. You remember wanting to believe. You remember trying. You remember staying open longer than felt wise. There were moments you ignored the weight in your chest, the subtle discomfort that said something wasn't right. Not because you were naive, but because you felt responsible for harmony, for understanding, for holding space. You learned early that your awareness could smooth things over, that if you felt enough, noticed enough, adjusted enough, things would work, and for a long time they did, until one day they didn't. Not loudly, not clearly, just enough to leave a mark you couldn't name. After that, trust became something you offered in pieces, carefully, quietly. You didn't stop believing in people. That's the strange part. You just stopped believing they would notice when they were crossing a line. So you started noticing for them. You became the one who pulled back before things tipped too far, the one who absorbed the impact before it reached the surface. And over time, that does something. It creates a sense of distance that doesn't feel like bitterness. It feels like awareness. But awareness has a cost. It keeps you alert. It keeps you scanning. It keeps you from resting fully inside connection. You're present, but not settled. And that tension builds quietly. Halfway through, something begins to clarify, not as a realization, more like a soft recognition. Trust didn't erode because people failed you once. It eroded because you learned to survive emotionally by anticipating disappointment. Not because you expected harm, but because you expected imbalance. You sensed again and again, that care was uneven, that you were often the one holding more weight. So you adapted. Your nervous system learned restraint. Your heart learned caution, not fear. Precision. Trust became less about belief and more about control. You trusted by managing exposure, by limiting depth, by staying just far enough back to stay steady. And that worked until you noticed you felt alone, even when you weren't. That's the subtle loss, not of trust in others, but of ease within yourself. You stopped letting moments unfold naturally. You started curating them, not to manipulate, but to protect what felt worn down. You didn't lose trust because you were hurt. You lost it because you kept adapting without being met. Because every time you softened and weren't held with the same care, something in you recalibrated. You became more careful, more self-contained. Not closed, contained. And no one told you that containment feels a lot like distance when it lasts too long. You still want closeness. You just don't believe it can arrive without cost. So you ration time, energy, truth. You tell yourself it's healthier this way. And maybe in some ways it is. But there's a quiet grief in realizing you no longer trust connection to hold you without calculation. You miss the version of yourself that didn't need to manage impact. The one who trusted without thinking about it. You don't blame anyone for that loss. You understand how it happened. That understanding is part of what makes it heavy, because you see both sides. You see the people who didn't know better, and the part of you that gave anyway, and you're tired of choosing between them. And toward the end, things slow down. You notice the silence more, the space between interactions. You notice how peace now comes from absence more than presence. And that's not wrong. It's just different. Trust hasn't vanished. It's become quiet. Selective. Still, it waits now. Not for perfection, but for reciprocity that doesn't require translation. You don't announce this shift. You don't explain it. You just live with it. And sometimes, late at night, you feel the weight of how carefully you move through people now. Not sad, just aware. Aware of what it cost to become this careful. Aware of what you protected, aware of what you no longer give freely. And in that awareness, there's no solution, just a soft understanding. That trust didn't break. It slowly learned how to survive.